Welcome to another webinar here at Route Consultant, where we're going to focus on waste routes. My name is Shelby Flanders. I'm on our education team here at Route Consultant, which just means my goal today is to bring you new information in the waste space and continue to be a place where we can come together and ask questions. Format-wise, if you've never been here before, we're going to go over some content. We're going to do some updates. And then if there are any questions at the end, we will have time for a Q&A. If anybody has any questions. It can be a question about today's topic or last week's topic or the space in general. You can hit us with anything you've got. We're always here to answer those questions. So if you're watching on YouTube and you can't ask us that question, please reach out to us after you're done watching this video. You can email us at info@routeconsultant.com. Or you can join us on next week's webinar. We have these every Thursday, every week. Now, if you have questions today and you are with us live, you can do that at the Q&A at the bottom of the window. Do not put them in the chat. We will probably miss them. But if you put them in the Q&A, we'll be able to see those and get those questions answered for you at the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you've been following along with us, then you know our waste expert, Tommy. If this is your first time watching a waste webinar with us, I would encourage you to go back and watch some of our past videos so that way you can get to know him in the waste industry a little bit better. But what you need to know today is that Tommy's been in the waste industry since he was a teenager, growing up with his dad and his brothers in the business, and then making other waste businesses very successful after that. And so Tommy's here to talk with us today about a very necessary topic, insurance requirements and considerations. So Tommy, hello, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Shelby, good to be here.
So let's just dive right in. You know, insurance isn't necessarily a glamorous topic, but it's definitely very important. It's something that everybody needs to know about. So what are some of the required common insurances in this space?
Yeah, and I want to start off by saying I'm not an insurance broker, but what I will do is share what I've learned from my experience over the years. So really, there are four that are common types of insurance that are in this space. One is the one that is required by most states, which is workers' comp insurance. And so, that's for employee injuries, medical bills, lost wages, if there's any rehab, anything of that sort. The other is the commercial auto policy or, vehicle insurance, and it covers accidents and everything associated with your vehicles. General liability is the third that is very common in this space because you definitely want to have that for third-party issues to make sure you're protected. And then the other is just property insurance. If you own or lease a facility, you'll want that to protect, not only the facility itself, but any equipment and inventory, any type of content you have in that facility. One that some people use, but it's not necessarily common, is the business interruption insurance. I mean, that's out there. It is available. It's not cheap, but something to consider as far as one of the policies that's common in this space.
Yeah, so an option, not necessarily something that you have to have, but something you should know about to know if you want it or not, right?
Right. Yeah.
So when you're looking at all these insurances, let's start with, I guess, how do you determine the amount of coverage you need to get? What kind of are some of the factors that lead to that decision?
Yeah, I mean, there's no specific formula that is used to say you need to have this. I mean, property is going to be determined by the value. Workers' comp is going to be, determined based on your category class, things of that sort. But there could be some customers that may require a specific amount of general liability or auto liability since you're going on their property. But outside of that, it really boils down to the amount of risk that you're willing to accept as a business owner. Yeah, as you look at that, understanding that you want to make sure you're protected, because if you're undercover, and we all know lawsuits can get very expensive. Should you get in that situation, you want to make sure you're covered in that regard.
Yeah. So let's say you have to use your insurance. What do the deductibles look like for those?
Yeah, again, a lot of that really determines on the amount of risk that you want to take. And I would tell you that one of the things that you need to make sure you're aware of as it relates to deductibles is, are you looking at or are you interested in a per incident deductible or an aggregate deductible? And so what that is a per incident is, I'm just going to throw out numbers. Let's say you have a $5,000 deductible. So, you have an incident that, costs $4,000, you're going to pay for it. If it costs $7,000, it's going to cost you five. But the other option that a lot of folks look at is an aggregate deductible, which let's say that may be 100,000 a year. Again, as you're looking at that, and what that means is the first 100,000 you're responsible for. So whether it is one incident or whether it's 40 incidents, you pay that, but it definitely has an impact on your costs. But that's something you want to make sure you understand and that you pursue, get information on as you're looking at insurance coverage.
Yeah. And we touched on this a minute ago, so I want to kind of go back to it. But we said a lot of this depends on other outside factors, maybe who you're working with. So can there be any agreements that maybe like have that specific insurance requirement? For example, like the municipal contracts that we've talked about in the past, do they have specific things they usually want to see a company have to cover?
Yeah, municipal agreements are always going to have minimum requirements that you've got to have. And again, it varies based on the municipality, but they're always going to tell you how much vehicle liability and general liability. And it's also not uncommon for them to be asked to be added as an additional insured, which means if they happen to get sued from something that they feel was your responsibility, then they can work directly with your insurance company. So that is not uncommon for them to ask that in that instant. The other thing that doesn't fit, but since we're talking about municipalities, is it's also not uncommon for them to ask for performance bonds as well. Uh, more and more folks in this industry have failed than in the past, and so it's very common for them to ask for a performance bond. Different, but as we're talking about things to think of, thought I would throw that out since we're speaking of municipalities.
Yeah, listen, we'll take any information we can get, right? That's what we want to be able to disseminate that to everybody. So absolutely. And maybe that's something we can have a whole webinar on later, right? We can kind of touch more on that in another topic. So are there any other situations or contracts that usually kind of require something special related to insurance?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you're going to have some of the larger companies that you may do business with, especially when you start getting into industrial manufacturing facilities when you're on there and they have, expensive equipment and it's there. Many of those are going to, may require some insurance requirements as well. The other is a large national company, that's either, regional or national. Many times for their own protection, they're going to require any and all contractors that come on their property to have those requirements. So those are possible outside of the municipality in that regard.
So in other words, really read the paperwork, really know what you're committing to, really know what you have to need anytime you're servicing a customer.
Right. Yeah. And it's one of those things you will want to put your standard wherever you decide, your coverage levels are. You'll want to put that in your agreement so it's up front, everybody knows. And as long as you manage that and they don't come back, you're good. And so those that have those, hard rules that nobody comes on our property unless they have this amount, they'll make you aware of it.
Yeah, that way you can get that right out of the gate, right?
Right.
So, as we're talking about what other people require, what are some ways that maybe an owner can impact their insurance, the cost of their insurance?
Yeah, I tell folks the most obvious is just don't have accidents and injuries. I mean, that's
That would be great. That's what every owner wants, and none of those.
yeah. I mean, and so because your experience and definitely drives your rates as you progress. But really, I would tell folks the best thing you can do is to have a robust safety program and truly drive a safety culture. There's a saying that I love is culture is determined by what you celebrate and by what you tolerate. And
Mhm.
I would tell you, as it relates to safety, that statement holds very true as to, if you tolerate unsafe behaviors and accidents, I mean, they're just going to continue. And so you want to make sure you're driving that culture. The other thing I would tell you is you may have employees that come from another waste company, but you're also going to get companies that don't. So your initial training, making sure people understand the hazards, making sure that you're doing ongoing training, having safety meetings frequently, that those are very important again to help you strive towards that goal of zero. The other thing I would tell you, it's the VEDRs, or what most people refer to as dash cams. There
Mhm.
are many insurance companies now that will give you credit based on you having that ability. And so definitely, I personally think they are a great tool because it helps you see your driver's actions while it's actually going on, and you can address things, spot on. But it's also great if you can get some deductions in your premiums. And but I would tell you to make sure you check and are there specific requirements, certain features that your program has to have before you would actually, go out and invest in it. But that's a great way to also impact your cost.
So let's say, there is something like maybe a property damage claim. I mean, do owners have to turn everything into their insurance company?
As it relates to property damage, I would tell you no. If it's not anything that is significant or getting into a structural type issue, you will be much better off either fixing it yourself or you know finding a contractor that can fix it. Because again, it's that if you take it, it's going to cost you, depending on what your deductible is and how you do that, but it may cost you a little more initially, uh, but over time, it has the real probability of saving you money long term.
Yeah, it would definitely help in that long run with those like monthly payments, different things like that.
Right.
So any, where it's other than property damage, you have to turn everything into your insurance company then if something happens.
Well, yeah, I would tell you, workman's comp law is going to drive that,
Yes.
and so everything has to be recorded from an accident standpoint. But whenever it gets more than first aid, when you're able to put a Band-Aid or something of that sort on, yes, you definitely have to turn that over. And as it relates to auto accidents, again, it really deals with how much risk you're willing to take. I will tell you from my experience where it ended up is the only time I would pay for it myself in the vast majority of cases was if there was nobody else in the vehicle. So it was if we happened to have bumped a parked unoccupied vehicle, then
Mhm.
I would look at that. But even in those situations, you have to understand you have to act quickly, because the speed of you reacting and responding to that owner can drive that to keep it from going to your insurance company. Rare occasion, if somebody was in the vehicle, especially nowadays, would I not turn it in because it can go berserk very quickly.
Yes, yeah, that's really good advice and something we're not necessarily used to in the FedEx space. So it's helpful to know for those who maybe are in the FedEx space watching this right now. Um, so how let's see. What type of, workplace injuries can happen in this space when you're talking about workers' comp?
Yeah, I would probably tell you the top three. And so The first are cuts and contusions on people's hands, from getting in and out, things they have to grabbing the doors of roll-off containers, grabbing bags of waste and throwing them, getting caught in enclosures, those types of things. But I would also tell you, uh, supplying gloves, the right kind of gloves, and really pushing your people to wear those. I mean, it's amazing, just to cut and not having to go get, 2 or 3 stitches because they grabbed something the wrong way. I mean, that pays off. So I would say that is the most common. The other are foot and ankle related issues. And it comes down to two things. The getting out at landfills, again, they have to get out, they have to make sure things are moved, and the surface at a landfill is not, it's uneven, it's not necessarily stable. Every inch is, it's not, you're not walking on concrete. And so, punctures through shoes, and so you want to make sure you require hard sole shoes. A lot of folks will push, hey, I just like my tennis shoes. I understand that, but there are tennis shoes that have plates in them and things of that sort. And then the other related to that are people just being careless and jumping out of the vehicle too quick. I mean, those types. So I would say that's number two. And then the third I would tell you are soft tissue back injuries. And it's all about people not lifting properly, not moving properly, twisting wrong, grabbing something, and twisting while they're picking up. And so, training on those. But I would say those are the three most common from an injury standpoint.
And you can, like you just said, you can do things like training to help mitigate those and get them equipment like gloves and different things like that. So that's super helpful.
Yeah.
Other than like workers' comp, are there other types of accidents that are pretty common in the space?
Well, I would tell you, as far as auto accidents, I'll throw out the commercial. If you're in the commercial line of business, you will have, or you typically have, more property damage type claims in that particular line of business. And it's because you're taking these big trucks into very close quarters, whether it is, the space, they didn't make their enclosure for the container big enough, or you happen to get there and at rush hour at a fast food restaurant, or you're going into a back alley somewhere, to get to a container. And so you will tend to have a few more property damage claims in that regard. But again, they may not be large, but occasionally things are going to get bumped. Outside of that, it is really no different than any other industry, or just going out on the road. The most common are typically rear end collisions, and it's somebody following too close, not paying attention, and bumping somebody. And the other, I would say, is, which again I think follows just accident trends, is sideswipe type incidents, where changing lanes on a multi-lane road, changing lanes, somebody not paying attention to their blind spot in the vehicle, or pulling out, whether it's a customer location or a side street, and these vehicles go into a lot of those, and not properly judging the time that they have to get across, a couple of lanes of traffic. So those are the most common, but there's really nothing from a vehicle accident standpoint that's contrary to any other accident, or even us personally driving our vehicles.
Yeah, pretty standard for the industry and just driving in general. So that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I know, living here in Nashville downtown, those drivers are pros because they do have to get in and out of some tight spaces with those containers. It's insane to watch them work.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
some of them can be pretty impressive how they get around.
yeah, my mom drives a very large vehicle, and she says that she almost can't drive normal cars anymore because of how she's learned how to maneuver large ones. So it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat to watch them work.
Right.
So, I think we've covered a lot of it. Are there any other types of insurances to consider?
Well, I would tell you one other thing to consider in this space is, if you are acquiring a company and you are moving into the space where they've operated, Or if you are moving into a space that's had a transportation company or some type of industrial type work being done there, I would highly encourage you to get environmental insurance. This may require a phase one or phase two, and things that come up if somebody is doing, they do their own fleet work and they've decided to pour their waste oil on the ground, something comes up to that and they track it back. You need to make sure you've got that protection. It's very it's very well worth it. And of course, being in the waste industry also, you don't want any publicity on an environmental issue that's going on at your site. So just, I tell you, be very smart, whatever the requirements are to get that, a phase one, sometimes a phase two environmental study. And many times you can require that in the purchase agreement, or actually as you're negotiating the lease, that it's not an expense to you to be able to get it. Maybe you pay for it. Maybe they pay for the first year or two. So but it's a good thing to have.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like a really good tip. So I maybe we'll even have a webinar on that one time. That's probably you can dive into that a little bit deeper, I'm sure.
Yes.
So how do you select an insurance broker or agent? How do you get started in looking for this?
I would tell you to find someone that either understands this space or is willing to learn about this space in your operation. Either or. If the individual is all they want to do is just give you a quote, I would tell you go somewhere else. Because you really want, as it relates to insurance and your broker or agent, you really need a partner. You want somebody that's going to sit there as we talk about what's the amount of risk you're willing to take. You need somebody that's going to be objective and say, hey, here's the potentials, here's what we've seen, here's what we know. If you want to bump this deductible here, you got to understand it could be this. If you want to look at an aggregate deductible versus an incident deductible. And so just find somebody who really wants to know your business. That is the biggest thing I can tell you. They don't have to know it today. I've used companies before that they didn't know the industry when we started, but they were willing to learn and they dug in, and actually as a result of that, they were able to get other industry too. Because again, there's a lot of waste companies out there. So that's the best advice I can give you on finding a broker, is find somebody that's interested in your business and wants to be your partner as it relates to insurance and managing your risk.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And if anybody out there is looking for that, we're more than happy to try to send you to the correct person in order to give you that partnership in your insurance. But thank you again, Tommy. Is there anything else that you can think of? Does that cover the gambit for us?
That's a pretty wide, high-level view of insurance in the waste business.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I know that's not always like a riveting topic to talk about, but it can save you a lot of time and money in the long run if you know about it up front. So those things, better be safe than sorry, right? So, well, if you as a viewer can think of a question after this webinar is over, please don't hesitate to reach out to us here at Route Consultant. We want to help you on your journey to become a waste owner. For those of you who are just starting in this space, we do have a one-on-one on our website. If you've done that, but you still want more education, we do have virtual new investor summits on the website as well. And then we have in-person workshops where you can come here to meet us in Nashville. And we can talk about your, opportunities, options, different things like that to help you get ready for the waste industry. So if you've got any questions, want to talk more about the New Investor Summit with us, please email us info@routeconsultant.com. And thank you again, Tommy, for being here. It's been always a pleasure.